Hey, and welcome to the AsherHQ HQ. If you hadn't noticed, you've stumbled across my first ever video and game review. I just wanted to say thank you for checking out my content, and if you enjoy what you see, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and drop a comment leaving any feedback. This footage was streamed over at Twitch, where we're building a great community of passionate gamers. Consider stopping by and leaving a follow to help support our growth. Now, without further ado, let's review. Halo Combat Evolved is a futuristic first-person military shooter game. Developed by Bungie and published by Microsoft, this 2001 video game giant quickly became a staple of both franchises and the gaming industry alike. Following the beloved main character of a few words but many names, such as John 117, the Master Chief, the Demon, and my personal favorite, John Halo. The game's story follows 117 as the main protagonist and the UNSC fleeing from the aftermath of the fall of Reach. In doing so, they stumble across the ancient technology of the Forerunners, a super technologically advanced species long since extinct that developed the superweapons known as Halo. Halo Combat Evolved sports an impressive 10 levels to cover, all of which we will break down into a detailed review covering graphics, gameplay mechanics, story, character development, replay value, audio, and my own overall enjoyment to get a detailed score of if this game actually holds up to its former glory. Do keep in mind that we'll be judging this game's graphics off of its old graphics style, and not the Anniversary Edition's enhanced graphics. And as such, we'll be scoring it based on its graphics for its time, and not what we expect to see in games these days. Shooting straight into it, we start off in the Pillar of Autumn, a massive ship used by the UNSC to travel the galaxy. During this intro scene, we learn that the UNSC made a blind jump through space to escape the Covenant, and in doing so, came across Installment 4, otherwise known as Halo. As they approach, we learn that the Covenant are already here, and in a very limited time will be all over the ship. This information forces Keyes, the commander of the Pillar of Autumn, to put the ship into combat alert and wake up the Master Chief. Our first bit of gameplay is very simple and self-explanatory. Acting as a tutorial, we have no weapons and we must first get introduced to the controls. I really like how they do this sequence, as it makes it feel very immersive to how it may feel waking up from a long cryogenic sleep and having to relearn your basic motor functions. So definitely some points there. Once we get through the calibration, we get introduced to our favorite Halo character of all time, Cortana. After which we begin being boarded by the Covenant. Commander Keyes then gives us the command to abandon the Autumn, which he plans to land on the newfound Halo. Keyes places his trust in us to take Cortana and keep her out of enemy hands, where he gives us our first weapon of the game, the iconic Magnum. Our next objective is to make our way through the ship, slaying Covenant as we make our way to the escape pods. The level concludes with us reaching the last escape pod, absolutely yeeting this UNSC soldier onto the pod and hitting the first of many iconic lines of the game.
Punch it.
In the next section, we get to see Halo firsthand as we exit our escape pod and have to navigate this unknown land. Something I really like here is the first look of the Halo as we begin our journey. There's something so cool about looking out at the galaxy and seeing the Halo go in a full circle around, fully inhabited by natural beauty like mountains, trees, and expansive oceans. As we explore, we make our way towards other escape pods, searching for any remaining survivors of the Autumn. It's a nice switch up from the tight corridor combat of the first level to the outdoors open combat that we get to see in this level. This particular combat encounter does lose a little bit of immersion, as the Covenant dropships have weird pacing, leaving sizable gaps between firefights, making this section feel a bit stretched out and awkward at times. Coming to the end of the engagement, Cortana is able to contact Thowhammer, a UNSC detachment, and request transportation, where we get our first look at the vehicle gameplay in the form of a shiny new Warthog. The first look at the Warthog is a great feeling. They did such a good job at making the Warthog feel like a durable, all-terrain vehicle. Extra emphasis on durable. The rest of the mission finds us traversing some ancient architecture and transitioning us into the next level of the act, where we continue our search for survivors. We'll mostly skip over this level, as it's just a simple move to location and kill enemies to save soldiers. One notable thing though is we get our first look at the sniper rifle, which I'm notoriously bad at using. Stupid jackals. Coming to the conclusion of the first two levels, our breakdown is looking pretty strong. The first levels feel so good to be thrown into. The combat mechanics feel smooth and are very easy to get the grasp of, seeing as this is a pretty basic military combat shooter which uses the same formula as many other games from the same time frame, stretching out all the way into some games we still see today. Following the point, shoot, throw grenade, and melee if combat gets a little too close formula. One of the biggest niches to take note of here, though, was that like many shooter games for the time, there was very limited aim-down sight compatibility. Something I really adore is how when most franchises adapted to that new style of aiming, Halo kept its iconic hipfire style of gunplay all the way through most future installments until around Halo 5, excluding some scoped guns like the sniper rifle, the Magnum, and a few other additions in the future sequels. I'll definitely not be knocking off any points for this mechanic, because as the franchise expands, it becomes such an integrated style choice. Rest assured, I have some opinions on when they decide to swap to the ADS functionality in the future, so stay tuned for that. Boogieing on into the third act, we face an immediate problem. Captain Keyes has been abducted by Covenant forces aboard a Covenant cruiser ship named the Truth and Reconciliation. A very strange name, I feel like, for a Covenant ship of all things, but we'll let that slide. Progressing through the level, we make our way through the Covenant forces with intent on reaching a gravity lift aboard the ship. A cool thing to note here is the introduction of hunters. Oh yeah. Oh, I forgot about that. Oh, okay. Hunters have always been one of my favorites among the Covenant ranks. Basically a hive mind of little worms that bunch together to form these formidable foes, among many other forms that we get to see in sequels to come. Once the hunters are defeated, we make our way into the gravity lift, and onto the ship where we get introduced to the first of the stealth saying Healy. Oh my goodness. Okay. The first look into the Covenant ship is definitely a memorable one, with interesting alien architecture in vibrant purple, pink, and blue colors. Something I begin to realize on this level, though, is just how bad the standard UNSC weapons actually are. The Magnum is a slow-firing, low-magazine pistol that struggles with killing anything above grunt level, whereas the assault rifle sporting a massive magazine size of 60 feels like you're basically peppering enemies with spitballs. And with no ADS functionality, you're just spray and praying at anything past 10 feet away. For the rest of the playthrough, I actually opted for the most unlikely of Covenant weaponry, the plasma pistol. Having no magazine restriction, other than the overheat feature holding you back from spraying plasma downrange, this pistol can be rapidly fired as fast as you can pull the trigger, sometimes putting elite level St. Healy down in just one quick burst. Whoa, that... You'll see that? Making our way through the ship, we check multiple holding cells, finding keys in the last one. It's at this stage of the game where we find out that the ring we're on is actually called Halo, and that the Covenant believe it's a super weapon with unimaginable power. The rest of the level wraps up with us making our way back through the ship so that we can escape and find Halo's control room before the Covenant. Sliding our way into Act 4, titled The Silent Cartographer, we get thrown back into the open world with a bit of opening lore from Cortana, stating that what the Covenant calls the Silent Cartographer is actually a map room that has information leading to Halo's control room. The beginning of this level has a sort of D-Day feeling to it. After being dropped into a beach and being immediately confronted with Covenant forces, this level is definitely a bit more fast-paced than some of the former. We kinda get dropped another Warthog, and now begin the mad dash to find this map room. We first come to a bunker absolutely covered in Covenant. Clearing our way through the building, we get roadblocked by a locked door, forcing us to take the Warthog to a separate bunker to unlock it. This style of level becomes very prominent through the rest of the game, where you'll have to do an objective, and then go to a further objective, and circle back to where you already have been to do something else. Well, it's not that bad on this level particularly. I definitely have my gripes with this style of misleading level design, especially in a game where there are not many waypoint indicators to tell you that you have to go back to the place you already cleared. Later in the game, this makes for some very confusing gameplay, but we'll get to that a bit later. Moving forward in the level, we fight through even more Covenant and eventually make it to our destination, where we use the control panel to unlock the door that we were already at, and then make our way back to said door. Entering the locked room, we navigate the interior, bringing us to the Silent Cartographer, where we find the location of the control room. We hastily make an escape and board a Pelican, where Cortana fills us in on some interesting information. The Halo installation is honeycombed with deep tunnels throughout the entirety of the ring, and it's in these tunnels that the control room lies. This information leads us right into Act 5, which is rightfully named The Assault on the Control Room. This level finds us lowered via Pelican into the tunnels mentioned previously. Assault on the Control Room is actually the longest mission of the 10 missions available, which leads us through a stretch of action-packed skirmishes both outdoors and indoors. The big thing about this level is the introduction of many new types of vehicles. The Ghost, the Wraith, and the Scorpion tank are all new introductions to this level. This is also the only level in the game that allows you to drive said tank, making this act a definite fan favorite. To save time, I'll definitely have to skim over most of this level, as I have actual hours of footage just for this one level alone, which is mostly just large combat encounters. Making our way to the end of the level, we access the control room and jack Cortana in, where we learn that the Halo is Forerunner technology and that the Covenant have awoken something and aim to use the Halo out of fear. We're then urgently sent off to find Captain Keyes, who Cortana claims is in great danger, where the 6th act kicks off. Titled 343 Guilty Spark, this mission takes place in the swamps near a containment facility. Making our way through said swamps, we come across the facility ourselves and make our way inside in search for Captain Keyes. Upon entering the facility, things seem off as the Covenant are stirred up and we come across a crazy UNSC Marine that begins shooting us on sight out of fear. Upon further traversal, we come across Captain Keyes' detachment, completely slaughtered. 117 jacks into the helmet of one of said Marines and finds out that what the Covenant unearthed was a nearly unstoppable force known as the Flood, a parasite that latches onto a host, transforming it and bending its will to theirs. Spreading like a plague, as long as there's biomass available, the Flood will continue to prosper. One big thing I found myself not liking all that much is just how unintimidating the Flood actually is compared to what they're capable of. During the livestream, my chat and I found ourselves laughing at the base parasite form due to how derpy and floppy they are. I mean, you could practically spit on these things and they'd die. They really only become a threat when they latch onto Covenant elites and the UNSC Marines due to the fact that they can now wield ranged weapons. Continuing on with the level, we simply need to make our way back the way we came and to the swamp in another sequence of level backtracking. Upon escaping, we reconvene with a helpless squad of soldiers, which I bravely lead through the swamp, saving every single one. And I lost my squad. They're all gone. They're dead. They're cooked. What? While making our way through the swamp, we come across a little mechanical testy that claims that its functionality is to prevent the Flood from escaping Halo. He then proceeds to teleport us directly into the next act. Titled The Library, this is another mission dedicated to the expansive underground Forerunner tunnels. Conveniently teleported straight inside, 117 must make his way through massive hallways littered with Flood in order to get access to what is called the Index in order to activate the installation. I'm not particularly fond of this level as the color palette is all dark and grey, and pretty much the entire map you traverse just feels like it's copy and pasted sections. Along that, most of the mission is making your way to doors and doing standoff sections where you just need to survive until the door is opened. I also don't really appreciate how fucking creepy Sparky is in this level as he ominously hums his way through the halls. This level sees us travel through many floors repeating the process of killing Flood, opening doors, and taking elevators. Eventually we make it down to the ground floor, where we obtain the Index, which Sparky takes into his possession immediately, and we make our way back to the control room where we left Cortana. Upon inserting the Index, we get a gamer rage moment from Cortana, as she fills us in on the fact that Sparky does not mean as well as we think. Cortana hits us with the most powerful line in the game.
Sod off!
And explains that the true use of the Halo is to destroy all biomass in the galaxy in order to starve the Flood to death, which obviously includes us. Sparky gives us his villain arc speech, and when we refuse to hand over Cortana and the Index, he sicks his sentinels on us with the intent to kill us and find someone else for the job. We begin the next section with Cortana hatching a plan to locate the Pillar of Autumn and use its reactors to set off a massive explosion she believes could destroy Halo. It's at this point of the game where the Covenant get reintroduced back into the enemy pool, alongside the Flood. This next level is easily the biggest example of level recycling in the game, and I have to say I definitely wasn't impressed. Finally, they were kind enough to actually give us what I think is like the third waypoint in the game. The objective moving forward is to steal a Banshee and fly up to the cliff sides and activate 3 reactors in the canyon. The issue with the level recycling in this game is that the floors they use have arrows in the doorways that are supposed to point you to the way that you need to go. This becomes an issue when you have to move through the level with no waypoints and get stuck in a labyrinth of arrows pointing the opposite of where you need to go. At one point I had both a viewer and my roommate looking online to figure out what I was doing wrong. Now, I know that this looks bad due to the fact that I've played this game a handful of times, so call it a skill issue if you'd like. But I bet almost anything that most people on their first time playthrough got stuck in this confusing maze of a level. So anyways, here's over an hour and a half of sped up torment for your entertainment. With the reactors gone, we jump right into the 9th mission out of 10 in the campaign. Titled Keys, this mission is based around the season rescue of Captain Keyes himself. This mission jumps us right back into a familiar place. The Truth and Reconciliation, where Cortana has detected Keyes to be alive with his implants intact. With the ship being damaged, and our path to Keyes blocked, we must find an alternative way to board the ship, taking us back to the ground in a unique way to keep this level feeling fresh and not like another simple level recycle. Being back on the ground, we now have to fight our way through the Covenant and the Flood alike, as they battle amongst themselves, making this a three-way confrontation in order to make our way to the distant gravity lift and get back onto the ship. Once back aboard the ship, we have an objective that we've never had before in this entire game. Locate the control room. After fighting through what feels like endless flood, we finally make our way to the ship's control room, only to find Captain Keyes completely transformed into this flood amalgamation. The only right thing to do was to rip out his implant and collect the codes for the Pillar of Autumn. With the codes secured, the remainder of the mission sees us on another mad dash to escape, while being assaulted by both Flood and Covenant. Having fought our way to the shuttle bay, we commandeer a Banshee and fly our way into the last of the 10 campaign missions. The mob brings us back to the crash site of the Pillar of Autumn, where all of this mess began. Starting off with 117 flying the Banshee directly into the wall in a sequence of badassery and silliness.
Oh man, I think we're on our last mission. Oh, we've been shooting for 5 hours.
Is falling apart.
It'll hold.
We're not gonna make it.
We'll make it.
Pull up. Pull up. You did that.
We're not gonna make it. We'll make it. This is why Master Chief became one of our favorite characters.
Having boarded the Pillar of Autumn, our objective is clear. Use the codes obtained from Keyes to overload the ship's fusion engines and hope the explosion is enough to destroy Halo for good. Making our way through the Pillar of Autumn's wreck to the ship's control room, we jack Cortana into the mainframe, where none other than Sparky shows up once again. Of course this little shit has to be as stubborn as possible, pausing our countdown and making us have to do this manually. Quickly, Cortana and 117 hatch together a plan to manually blow up the reactors in yet another iconic scene.
He must be trying to take the core offline. Even if I could get the countdown restarted, I don't know what to do.
How much firepower would you need to crack one of the engine shields?
Not much. A well-placed grenade, perhaps, but why?
Sparky summons his Sentinel lackeys to kick us off into the combat stage of this level. Defeating them and moving our way through the ship, we also once again find ourselves fighting the Covenant and the Flood. Finally arriving at the engine room, we enter the second last phase of the game. Acting sort of like a final boss fight, we must fight hordes of Flood while lobbing explosives into the engine's reactors to manually detonate them. My smartass completely forgot to grab the rocket launchers the game provides for you, and found myself struggling to find enough grenades to get the job done. Until I finally get wise enough to backtrack and find said rocket launcher, where I finish off the last reactor without a hitch. Concluding this stage, we enter the final run of the game, and in my opinion the most iconic section of all 10 acts, the Warthog escape sequence. This section leaves you with 6 minutes to travel 3 kilometers down the length of the Pillar of Autumn and to your escape. This level does such a good job of instilling the feeling of urgency, with so many cool jumps and explosions leading you all the way to your escape, leaving Halo behind in pieces. The game concludes panning out from our escape ship and one final iconic line from John 117, and the game comes to a close.
Hey, Lind. It's finished.
No. I think we're just getting started.
Hard. I think we're just getting started. Hard. Hard.
Now, with the gameplay out of the way, let's dive into the final analysis stage of the review. All in all, Halo 1 is such a nostalgic blast to the past for gaming, and I tried to form as honest of an opinion as possible for this breakdown. Do keep in mind that 1/7 of this rating is simply based on my own personal experience with the game, which may vary from your own. If you're unhappy with how I've graded the experience, you should try grading it yourself using the same formula, which I'll leave in the description below. While you're down there, make sure to drop your own rating in the comments alongside any feedback you may have. Now, moving into the graphics. For its time, I feel like these shoot above average. And I'm looking at much more than the clay-like terrain and sometimes blank and boring architecture of most of the interior buildings. Halo 1 brings so many vibrant color palettes to the game, with the Covenant's bright purples, pinks, and blues, and the beautiful outdoor shots we get during many of the ground sections, displaying the beauty of the natural terrain of Halo. I decided on a solid 7 out of 10, knocking a few points off for the ugly interiors and clunky clay-like architecture. Moving into gameplay, it gets a similar score, but knocked down a little bit more. For the most part, the gameplay is fun and engaging. The combat is smooth and easy to grasp, even for beginners, and you can't go wrong with the unique level design with massive scale ground and air skirmishes. Some things I had to be more critical of, though, was the lack of guidance. Throughout the game, you're hit with very few waypoint markers for a game that expects you to do so much backtracking into zones you've already cleared, which, as you know, is yet another major gameplay mechanic flaw. All of the level recycling. These two issues combined make for a sometimes very confusing experience, leaving you lost in labyrinths of Forerunner tunnels with little way to figure out your pathing. Taking a deeper look into the combat, the weapon system in Halo is one that I'll always adore, but that definitely isn't going to distract me from how out of whack this game's weapon balancing actually is. While guns like the sniper rifle and the shotgun smack like a cannon, the Magnum, assault rifle, needler, and plasma rifle all feel like hitting a brick wall with wet paper. And of course I gotta give a special shout out to the OG of this game, the plasma pistol. What later becomes one of the weakest damaging weapons in the entire game's franchise, only redeemed by its utility, absolutely shreds anything in its path with nearly an infinite supply of ammo and only a small overheat to punish you. Maybe I went a little too hard, but I decided on a 6 out of 10 on the review chart for this section. Sliding us into the next section, the Halo universe is extremely rich with epic lore. Even before the events of Halo 1 takes place, there is already backlogged lore that goes back extensively. If you're a lore lover like I am, you may already know what I'm talking about, and if you're unfamiliar with the Halo lore as a whole, I highly recommend looking into it. Unfortunately, we definitely don't have time for a complete Halo lore breakdown, but as far as my rating for the story goes, I've gotta hit it with that 10 out of 10, baby. It doesn't get much better than fleeing total annihilation, only to crash land on a ring that turns out to be a super weapon, and now you're fighting aliens and parasites for the sake of humanity. Getting into character development, throughout the story we only follow John 117 as the main character. Occasionally we have Cortana, and very rarely do we actually see allies in combat, so this section will be a short one. I gave the character development in this game an on-the-nose passing grade of 5 out of 10. To put it simply, thanks to Google, I found out that between the first 3 games, John 117 only has a total of 68 speaking lines, all of which are 5 words or less. One voice line short from a nice from me. While strong silent type protagonists are cool and all, they just don't make for very good storytelling, and the John 117 that wakes up from cryo in the beginning of the game is still relatively the same we're left with at the end. The only reason I kept this at a 5 is that while John as a character doesn't develop much himself, we still get to learn a lot about what kind of soldier he is through the story. A focused badass that comes across as quite silly sometimes with how serious he actually is, making him the character that we all know and love. Taking a look at the audio section, the music in the Halo franchise is definitely one of the most memorable. While Halo 1 doesn't hold up to all of its sequels in this regard, I still find the soundtrack to be engaging and intense when it needs to be. Something janky I dislike though is how combat music either comes on when nothing is really happening, or even lingers around a little too long after an engagement is finished. As for the weapons, I absolutely love how the Covenant weapons sound. It's futuristic, it's sci-fi, and it fits the bill for a technological alien race. And as for the human weapons, minus the assault rifle, they sound like they actually carry weight while you're raining lead down range. And taking a look at the dialogue, the simple answer is,
I'm the man! I am the man!
Pozzoli indeed. I gave this section an 8 out of 10. Jumping into the replay value, this is a section that may vary from player to player. This campaign is definitely the kind that I can see someone playing once and being okay not to touch it again. But I, for one, at least once a year get the hankering to jump back into this game and play through all the Halo games on Legendary difficulty. Call me biased, but I'm giving this section a fair score of 7 out of 10. Moving us into the 7th and final section that I believe to be the most important of all, overall enjoyment. No matter what kind of gamer you are, did you enjoy this experience? And while I have a good number of gripes and more than a handful of rage-inducing moments streaming this game, yes, I will always enjoy a good Halo playthrough. For this reason, I left Halo 1 with an 8 out of 10. Just to account for those really frustrating levels, and for the love of God, stop giving the Flood rocket launchers. Wrapping up the numbers section of the review, we're left with a respectable 51 out of 70, which brings us to a 73% rounded up. Ooh, that was a lot of yapping. But for now, that's all I have for you guys. So let me know in the comments if you agreed or disagreed with any points I made during this analysis. And while you're down there, consider leaving a like if you liked the video, and subscribe if you'd like to see more review content similar to this. We plan on covering the entire Halo franchise moving forward, sprinkling in a few standalone games in between before moving on to another series. If you have any recommendations of what you'd like to see reviewed, leave a comment or reach out to me on my socials. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the AsherHQ HQ.
What is bro doing?